The night I went into labor, Yanxiu called for water 3 times in my half-sister's room. The next day, while I was still bleeding out, he couldn't wait to announce, "From this day forth, move out of the main courtyard, demoted from wife to concubine. You can't even bear a healthy child. What use do I have for a proper wife like you?" The whole household was waiting to see me cry, go mad, or kill myself. But I refused to give them what they wanted. I obediently moved into the run-down side courtyard, handed over the household management tokens, as if I'd accepted my fate. Until the day of the palace banquet, my half-sister's pregnant belly became the laughingstock of the entire capital. Because the head of the Imperial Medical Bureau diagnosed it right in front of the emperor, the Marquis of Zhongyang was completely infertile. "You can't even bear a healthy child! What use do I have for a proper wife like you?" Yanxiu's furious roar still echoed in my ears. I lay on the birthing bed, drenched in sweat, nails digging deep into my palms, yet nothing could counter the gut-wrenching agony tearing through my belly. A whole night of difficult labor had drained every last bit of my strength. When I struggled to pry open my heavy eyelids, what greeted me was Yanxiu's cold, indifferent face. Beside him, my half-sister Zhu Huan had her hair slightly disheveled, almond eyes misty with desire, leaning in his embrace and smirking at me. "I've already informed your father and obtained the marriage contract." He tossed a crimson betrothal document onto my bed. "From this day forth, you are demoted from wife to concubine." I picked up the marriage contract with trembling hands. The cinnabar ink was still wet, stinging my eyes. His name and Zhu Huan's were written side by side. Me half-sister, who just yesterday kept saying she came to help with my delivery, was now disheveled and nestled in my husband's arms. I forced myself up despite the excruciating pain. "Where is my child?" The wet nurse timidly brought over a swaddled bundle. The infant's face was pale and bluish, breathing faint as a spider's thread. Zhu Huan covered her lips and giggled. "The imperial physician said you likely won't be able to conceive again. Little sister." As for this sickly little thing, she paused meaningfully. "I am afraid he won't survive the winter." Yanxiu held Zhu Huan by the waist, his tone icy. "The Fu family needs a healthy heir. You've always been known for your virtue, so you should know your place. Starting today, move to the side courtyard. This main courtyard will be given to Huaner." Only after they left together did my dowry nanny whisper with reddened eyes, "Miss doesn't know, but last night that vixen was in the adjacent room, with the young master, shamelessly asked for water 3 times." I looked down at the dying child in my arms, suddenly feeling a bone-chilling cold. So while I was hovering between life and death, my husband was entangled in passion with my half-sister. Those cries of pleasure must have drowned out my agonized screams. All of the capital praised the Marquis of Zhongyang for his deep devotion. He knelt through 3 inches of snow until his knees were raw, all to beg for the hand of a fallen orphan like me. But now my postpartum hemorrhage hasn't even healed yet. He can't wait to demote his wife to a concubine. I still remember the day the late emperor bestowed our marriage Yanxiu in a moon-white brocade robe, jade crown binding his hair, took my hand before all the court officials, his eyes seemingly filled with falling stars. "In this life, I will marry no one but Zhu Yan. One lifetime, one pair forever." But now, I stood at the wind's edge, holding my dying child, watching helplessly as my courtyard was draped with blinding red silk. Zhu Huan's personal maid arrogantly directed the servants to hang lanterns. Seeing me, she actually rolled her eyes. "Oh my, why is the concubine here? This place has bad luck written all over it. Don't go ruining the new madam's joyous occasion." My fingertips dug into my palm as I sharply demanded, "Who gave you permission to touch my courtyard?" The maid sneered. "The Marquis said this courtyard needs to be redecorated for the new madam to live in. As for you," she glanced at the child in my arms, "you'd better hurry up and move somewhere else with that sickly little thing." "Miss." Yangshu rushed over frantically, supporting my swaying body, her eyes red-rimmed. "They deliberately sent me away. Why did you come out alone?" The servants all around watched coldly from the sidelines, not a single one intervening, instead whispering among themselves, as if watching a joke unfold. Hongsho gritted her teeth and supported me. Let's go find the old madam. She has always doted on you. She'll surely stand up for you. Yes, there is still mother-in-law presiding over this manor. I still remember the day I married into the Marquis manor. Mother-in-law held my hands with tears in her eyes. Good child, from now on, you are my own daughter. When I had morning sickness, she personally rubbed my back. In the cold winter, fearing my feet would freeze, she specially ordered people to bury heating flues under the green bricks. Who in this entire manor doesn't know that the young madam is the old madam's precious darling, untouchable? She will definitely get me justice. I held the swaddling clothes tightly, treading through the snow, supported by Hongsho towards Xian Hall. Along the way, the servants all avoided me when they saw me, as if I were some plague god. A little maid secretly slipped me a hand warmer, but was slapped to the ground by the head matron. Cheap hussy, can't even read which way the wind blows in this manor now, courting death. The warm fragrance of Xian Hall wafted toward me, and in a daze I seemed to have returned to the past. But the next moment, I heard mother-in-law's smiling voice. Huaner, quickly try this blood swallow's nest. Mother specially had it rushed here by fast horse from the south. I froze at the doorway. Ju Huan was reclining on the R-hat couch, mother-in-law personally feeding her soup, her eyes full of doting. Seeing me, Ju Huan feigned panic, shrinking into mother-in-law's embrace. Mother, younger sister, she. My mother-in-law turned around and saw me. The kindness on her face instantly froze into ice. Why are you here? She leisurely wiped her hands. Didn't Yanxiu tell you? Since you are here, you might as well hand over the storehouse keys to Huaner. You are frail, so there is no need to worry about the trivial matters of the household. Trivial matters. I looked at the mountain of brocade boxes piled in her room. Those were all congratulatory gifts from various households, celebrating the birth of my son. For 3 years I've been maneuvering and managing among the nobility, barely maintaining the dignity of the declining Zhongyang Marquis manor. Did she really think that without me handling things behind the scenes, those haughty noblewomen would give this old woman without an imperial title even a shred of respect? I stood before the hall, wind and snow hitting my face. Yet suddenly I recalled the scene of my grandfather teaching me to draw a bow when I was young. His rough, large hands wrapped around my small hands, the iron-limbed bowstring hummed, and the arrow shot through the air, hitting the bullseye 100 paces away, dead center. Yonner, remember, grandfather's voice echoed in my ears. If you can't kill with one strike, pretend to be a wounded rabbit. Show weakness and lie low first. And when the wolf comes close, he suddenly drew his blade, then stabbed through its throat. I touched the short blade grandfather gave me hidden in my sleeve. When I looked up, I had already put on a submissive expression. Yes, this concubine will go fetch the keys now. When I returned to the main courtyard holding my child, Fu Yanxiu was standing in the corridor. Dusk hung heavy. He wore a moon-white brocade robe, his hair bound with a jade crown, features as exquisite as a painting still, that same young man from years ago, his expression tender enough to drown someone in. I stepped forward slowly, gently lifting the child in my arms, my voice hoarse. Husband, our child has yet to be named. Perhaps. A name? He suddenly let out a sneer, the tenderness in his eyes cracking inch by inch, revealing venomous mockery. A sickly wretch, who won't live past 1, does he deserve my attention? Cold wind swept past. My fingertips trembled, yet I laughed softly. It seems, husband, all your hopes rest in my half-sister's belly. He couldn't even be bothered to glance at me, turning away with a sweep of his sleeve. Move out tomorrow. This courtyard is to be given to Huaner for her pregnancy. I stood frozen in place. Every brick and tile of this courtyard he had personally chosen for me back then. The night before our wedding, he had pointed at that newly planted crabapple tree and whispered in my ear with a soft laugh, "Ah, Yan loves crabapple blossoms most. When they bloom next year, I'll pluck a branch to pin in your hair." Now the crabapple tree had been uprooted entirely, replaced by a wisteria swing Zhu Huan's favorite. I suddenly laughed aloud. Fu Yanxiu, Do you still remember what you said that year, kneeling in the snow in the dead of winter?" His brow furrowed, a flash of panic crossing his eyes. I spoke word by word, each syllable like a knife carving into my heart. "You said, 'In this life I only wish to grow old with a yan. If I break this oath, may heaven strike me down with lightning.'" Before my words faded, a muffled thunder suddenly rolled across the sky, startling the lanterns under the eaves into violent swaying. Fu Yanxiu's face changed drastically. He stumbled back a step as if tainted by something filthy, and shouted harshly, "Preposterous." I watched his fleeing figure, then lowered my head to kiss my child's ice-cold little face. "My child, your father is afraid of thunder." Before long, Yanxiu came in holding a fox fur cloak, suppressing resentment in her eyes. "Madam, the carriage is ready," the Marquis said. "Since you are unwell, you might as well go to the manor to recuperate." I stroked the wolf-bone blade and chuckled softly. Have they forgotten? My maternal grandfather was the war god of the northern border. I grew up in the army since childhood, drinking snow water and resting my head on blade sheaths. What the wind and snow of the northern border taught me was never to swallow my anger, but rather kill slowly, gouge the heart precisely, and when slicing flesh with a blunt knife, sprinkle hot salt on the wound for the full effect. Tell the Marquise that this madam wishes to stay at Kunning Palace for a while. I leisurely stroked my child's pale little face. Just say that the Empress misses the young heir and wants to see him with her own eyes. Yanxiu's eyes widened in shock. Who in the entire capital didn't know? Before the Empress entered the palace, she and I were close friends from our boudoir days, and she was fiercely protective of her own. As the carriage passed through Juke Street, I flicked my fingertip and lifted the curtain, letting everyone in the capital see the Marchioness of Zhongyang was holding a sickly infant, tear stains still fresh at the corners of her eyes, her frail figure swaying as if about to collapse in the wind and snow. Sure enough, within a month, rumors in the capital spread like wildfire. I heard the Marquis of Zhongyang favors his concubine and mistreats his wife. He doesn't even care that his legitimate son is gravely ill. That illegitimate daughter of the Zhu family hasn't even married in yet, but she dares to withhold medicine from her legitimate sister. What audacity! Poor Marchioness, forced to hide in the palace, too ashamed to even return to her maiden home. I reclined on the soft couch in Kunning Palace, listening to the palace servants' reports, the corners of my lips slowly curling up. The show had only just begun. The day Fu Yanxiu came to fetch me, he happened to run into the emperor dining at Kunning Palace. He knelt outside the palace gates for a full hour before the emperor leisurely set down his teacup. Let him in. When he entered the hall, he stumbled and nearly fell. I lowered my eyes and pursed my lips, while the child in my arms whimpered a couple of times right on cue, prompting the empress to pass over a hand warmer with concern. Actually, before he even arrived, the emperor had already summoned me privately. A bright yellow memorial was pushed in front of me, the vermilion annotations glaring. The 4 characters favoring concubine over wife still had wet ink stains on them. The emperor tapped his finger on that spot. Your maternal grandfather's entire family were loyal martyrs. I promise to look after you. How do you want me to handle this? I held my child and curtsied deeply. This consort has no grievances with the Marquis. It is just that the Empress feels sorry for me and invited me to stay in the palace for a while. As for the rumors outside, the Empress chimed in at the right moment. Your Majesty, Yaner has had her own mind since she was little. Just let her handle it herself. So at this moment, the Emperor glanced at the kneeling Fu Yanxiu with a half-smile. I remember, back then, it was you who knelt in the snow, insisting on marrying the legitimate daughter of the Zhu family. The white jade thumb ring tapped crisply on the table, now causing such a city-wide scandal over a concubine. Marquis Zhongyang, well done. A casual remark. Yet, it made Fu Yanxiu's face turn ashen. From now on, no matter how big a splash my half-sister made, she would forever be just a concubine who couldn't be presented in public. In the carriage back to the manor, Fu Yanxiu grabbed my wrist, his eyes churning with venomous hatred. How dare you? I stroked the bruise on my wrist, smiling brightly. The Marquis should watch his words. The emperor just said he would send the imperial physician to check my pulse daily. Ju Huan eventually gave up the main courtyard after all. I heard from the nanny that she smashed 3 tea sets in her room. Me mother-in-law's gaze was like a poison-dipped needle, yet I leisurely savored the cloud mist tea, newly bestowed by the emperor in front of all the household servants. I had Yanxiu take the young heir back to his room to rest first. Ignoring their gazes, I sat down directly. Why is elder sister still performing a concubine's greeting? I blew away the tea foam, waiting until her legs trembled from squatting before saying, "You may rise." Fu Yanxiu immediately rushed up to support her, then turned to glare at me furiously. "Vicious woman, it was already merciful of me to let you keep your position as the legal wife, yet you dare humiliate Huaner." Ju Huan stroked her belly and looked at me with a soft smile. "Little sister, I am already with child. The imperial physician said this baby is most likely a boy. The future hope of the Marquis Manor all rests right here." I let out a cold laugh. No wonder. No wonder, after returning to the manor, each of them was so high and mighty. I was about to retort sharply. But then Yanxiu came stumbling in, half her face swollen badly. "Madam, the young heir has been—" I shot to my feet. What happened to Honger? A burst of laughter came from the back courtyard. 7 or 8 servant women surrounded a brocade-clad young boy who was tossing my Honger into the air like a ball. Little sickly runt, catch this. A vicious glint of satisfaction flashed in that child's eyes as he deliberately let go. Thud. Honger crashed heavily into the snow, his little face instantly turning purple-red. When I rushed over, my fingertips touched Honger's scalding forehead. He was running a fever. The child I had carefully nursed for over a month in the palace couldn't even cry out loud now, only able to let out feeble whimpers like a kitten. "Yanxiu." I shoved the token into her hands. "Hurry and fetch the imperial physician." Silver needles pierced one by one into Honger's bruised little body. I stared at the imperial physician's tightly furrowed brow, my nails digging deep into my palms. Suddenly, the beaded curtain was roughly thrown aside. Fu Yanxiu barged in with a huge crowd of people, servants carrying lanterns that lit up the dim inner chamber bright as day. "Madam, the young master needs to rest quietly." The old imperial physician wiped the sweat from his brow, his voice kept extremely low. I glared furiously at the boy behind him. The child was only 8 or 9 years old, dressed in fine silk with a jade belt. "Yaner, children don't know any better." Fu Yanxiu pushed him forward. He heard his little brother was sick and insisted on coming to see him. The boy grinned widely and suddenly pulled out a cloth bundle from his sleeve. "Little brother, I brought you something yummy." He violently shook the bundle open, and a handful of walnuts came crashing down onto Honger's face with a clatter. The hard shell edges scratched thin bloody marks across the child's tender little face. The blood in my entire body instantly froze. Honger was allergic to nuts. Even the slightest contact would make him break out in rashes all over and have difficulty breathing. I lunged forward like a madwoman, but Fu Yanxiu grabbed my wrist and held me back. "Yaner Mingyi is only 9 years old. Children play rough without knowing their limits. Why must you make a fuss?" "Play rough?" My voice was terrifyingly hoarse. Throwing a child with a high fever into the snow is playing rough. Hitting his face with walnuts is playing rough. Ju Huan leaned against the doorframe with a cold smile. "Little sister, looking at how hysterical you are now, do you still have any dignity befitting the main wife of a marquis household?" She suddenly stroked her flat belly. "Ah, and here our husband was being so considerate of you. Yanxiu, bring the family punishment rod." I suddenly drew the wolf-bone knife from under my pillow. The cold gleam of the blade forced everyone to retreat to the front hall. No matter whose bastard this is that was brought in since he hurt my Honger today, I'll make him crawl out of here. But Zhu Huan suddenly let out a miserable cry, clutching her stomach. "Husband, our child." Everyone instantly fell into chaos. Me, mother-in-law, shouted harshly, "Vicious woman, are you trying to infuriate Huaner to death and leave the Marquis's household without an heir?" Only then did Fu Yanxiu lean down and whisper in my ear, "Yaner, your body is damaged, and you can no longer conceive." This child. He looked at the young boy beside him. I carefully selected him from the clan to be adopted under your name, so you'll have someone to rely on in the future. Clang, I swept my hand and knocked the teacup to the floor. The broken porcelain splashed onto Fu Yanxiu's boots. Only now did I see clearly that young boy's features bore a 70% resemblance to his, and now seeing how protective they all are of him, suspicions filled my heart. My Honger was struggling on the edge of life and death, yet they had long been scheming, wanting my child dead. Suddenly that wretched child broke free from restraint, pointing at the inner chamber and shrieking. The imperial physicians all said you'd have no heir. That sickly little thing should have long ago slapped. I raised my hand to strike, but my mother-in-law suddenly shoved me aside, her nail guard scratching across my cheek as she shielded the child behind her. Warm blood dripped down my chin, yet I saw that child make a throat-slitting gesture at me. Just then the imperial physician stumbled out of the room. "Madam," the young master, "I am afraid he won't make it through tonight." Fu Yanxiu seized the moment and shouted, "Since you are so obstinate, this child will be registered under your name and raised by Huaner. This marquise has given you enough face." As they left surrounding Zhu Huan, that child suddenly turned back and mouthed to me, "You are next." I collapsed by Honger's bedside, listening to his breathing grow weaker and weaker. Outside the window, Fu Yanxiu was gently coaxing Zhu Huan. "Don't be afraid. Once that little bastard dies, Minji will be the legitimate eldest son." I lowered my head, looking at the bloody holes my nails had dug into my palms, and suddenly laughed. "Very well, since you want to play. I'll play big with you, my Honger." Died. I held him and sat through the night. The next day, just as dawn was breaking, the courtyard gate was violently kicked open. Zhu Huan wore a crimson gold embroidered jacket and skirt, the hair ornaments in her hair swaying blindingly. The moment she entered, she pressed a handkerchief over her nose and mouth, as if there was something filthy in this room. "Sister, my condolences." A smile lingered at the corner of her lips, but her face was full of smugness. "The Marquis is busy and can't get away. He specifically instructed that the funeral be kept simple after all." She suddenly leaned down and whispered in my ear, "This little bastard was only suffering by living. Dying early means reincarnating early." I had sat motionless all night, my tears long dried up. At this moment I was just gently combing the fine, soft hair on Honger's forehead. Seeing that I ignored her, Zhu Huan let out a cold laugh and walked straight to the vanity, snatching up the household management token. "From now on, sister needn't trouble herself with the affairs of this manor." She deliberately straightened her waist. "After all, the future legitimate heir of the Marquis Manor is right here in my belly." Hongshu trembled with rage and was about to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her and said indifferently, "Hongshu, go fetch Honger's mourning clothes." Zhu Huan was stunned for a moment, then burst into a shrill laugh. "What? Sister still wants to hold a grand funeral?" She violently knocked over the medicine bowl beside her that had long gone cold. The Marquis said, "A bastard who died young, just dig a random pit in the mass graves and bury him." I slowly raised my head. Zhu Huan. Zhu Huan suddenly fell silent. She saw clearly what was in my hand. A blood-stained pair of scissors was pressed against her swollen belly. "Tell me, will this scissors draw blood first?" I leaned close to her pale face. "Or will that lump of flesh in your belly hit the ground first?" Suddenly, chaotic footsteps came from outside the door. Fu Yanxiu rushed in with the servants, but I had already put away the scissors. "My lord!" Zhu Huan cried out and threw herself into his arms. "This vicious woman wants to kill our child." I slowly stood up and walked in front of them. "Tell me, can your belly safely last until the day of delivery?" Her face instantly turned deathly pale. Honger's funeral was hastily finished, and before the paper ashes had even scattered, I was driven to Tinyu Pavilion, the most remote corner of the Marquise's residence. This courtyard had fallen into disrepair, with cobwebs covering every corner of the eaves. Hongshu wiped her tears while packing the trunks, but I smiled looking at the half-withered crabapple tree in the courtyard. Back then, Yanxiu said, "When the flowers bloom next year, I'll pin them in your hair, and now it has come true in this way." After Zhu Huan seized the household management tokens, she couldn't wait to show off everywhere. She changed the household rules beyond recognition. She abolished the morning and evening greetings, dismissed the night patrol guards, and even replaced the kitchen purchasers with her maternal family's relatives. In just half a month, the marquise's residence was in complete chaos. There wasn't even any rice left in the kitchen this morning. Yanxiu came back, carrying an empty food box, stomping her feet in anger. Concubine Zhu stuffed her cousin into managing the purchasing, and that gambler lost all the silver. I leaned against the grape trellis, flipping through the account book. What about the stables? Even worse. Yanxiu lowered her voice. The Marquis's favorite Jiaobai horse was fed moldy fodder, and now it is foaming at the mouth. I smiled. After all this trouble she has stirred up, the already meager storehouse probably couldn't withstand a few more days of this chaos. In the blink of an eye, it was a few days before mother-in-law's 60th birthday. Originally, I had already prepared everything meticulously. The embroiderers from Suzhou had prepared the longevity-patterned brocade half a year in advance. The lychees from Lingnan were transported to the capital day and night by ice boats. Even the opera troupe was specially invited from Yangzhou, now that she is in charge of household affairs. She claimed there was a shortage of silver and changed everything with a wave of her hand. Yanxiu found out that the tea used for the birthday banquet was actually moldy old tea. The performers were a ragtag troupe cobbled together from the brothels. I closed the account book, my fingertip lightly tracing a certain page, lost in thought. There it recorded the 3,000 taels of silver mother-in-law borrowed last year. The purpose was written as incense money. But in reality, suddenly the courtyard gate was kicked open with a bang. Zhu Huan charged at me like a marketplace shrew. Zhu Yan. She slammed an account book in front of me. "You deliberately squandered all the silver in the treasury before handing over the household management to me, didn't you? How heartless of you." I didn't even look up at her, leisurely savoring the bloodbird's nest in my hand. She became even more furious. "You still have the nerve to eat bloodbird's nest. The storeroom has been emptied by you." I laughed. This bloodbird's nest was imperially bestowed top quality, far more precious than those moldy old goods in the Marquis Manor storeroom. She couldn't even tell the difference. It seems my aunt really didn't teach her the ability to distinguish quality. "Why don't you go ask mother-in-law?" My fingertip traced across the account book, for example, this deficit of 3,000 taels from last December. Zhu Huan suddenly froze. These years, every page of the Zhongyang Marquis Manor's account books has been soaked with my blood and sweat. The fine clothes and delicacies for everyone in the manor, which of them wasn't barely sustained by the farmlands and shops from my dowry? Of course she didn't know. All these years, mother-in-law has been using the manor's money for loan sharking, and all the interest went to pay off her maternal nephew's gambling debts. Now that I am no longer covering the shortfall, she actually wants to pin the blame on me. When Yanxiu returned to the manor, he happened to catch Zhu Huan grabbing mother-in-law and wailing, "We can't even prepare enough tea leaves for the birthday banquet. Mother, where did all that silver go?" Mother-in-law slapped her across the face. "Shut up." Nothing went wrong when Yanner was managing the household. So why did so many problems crop up as soon as the authority tokens were given to you? I watched coldly as they fought like dogs. How could Zhu Huan, a mere concubine, have any personal savings? Mother-in-law's money-lending business was done extremely secretly. But after all, I used to manage the storeroom, so I still discovered some clues. Yanxiu listened for a while and finally understood what they were arguing about. He asked Zhu Huan with a stern face, "How much is the storeroom short?" Zhu Huan grabbed onto him like a lifeline, clutching his sleeve tightly, her voice shrill. 20,000 taels of silver are gone. That is the entire yearly expenses of the Marquis Manor. Yanxiu had thought it was just a small amount. Hearing this number suddenly, his face instantly turned pale. "Mother, where did all the money go?" Mother-in-law stammered, her eyes shifting. "This She suddenly pointed at me drinking tea on the side, as if she had found a scapegoat. Yanner's dowry was generous. She used to cover the expenses before, but now Juhuan and mother-in-law argued for a long time. She knew mother-in-law was in the wrong, but also understood that the money most likely couldn't be recovered. Hearing her say this, Juhuan immediately caught on and chimed in. "That is right, husband. As long as little sister brings out the dowry list, everything will be solved." I sneered. "Now I don't even have the authority to manage the household anymore. Why should I use my dowry to fill this hole?" Juhuan immediately put on a virtuous face. "We're all people of the Marquis Manor. What is yours or mine?" Little sister saying this is too distant. My mother-in-law also chimed in self-righteously. "Exactly, Yanner. I remember those shops of yours on East Street. Any one of them could cover the Marquis Manor's expenses for a whole year." I slowly sipped my tea, not responding. Seeing this, Fu Yanxiu directly assumed the posture of the head of the household, making the final decision. "Then it is settled. Hand over your dowry list to Huaner for verification as soon as possible." My fingers tapped lightly on the table twice, and I suddenly smiled. "I heard you are thinking of sending that child Mingyi to my Fang family's academy." When Fu Yanxiu heard me mention the Fang family academy, his eyes immediately lit up. I knew that child had reached the age for schooling, and the Fu family, being of military background, had no scholarly foundation to speak of. They had been worrying about the child's education recently. Besides, I had investigated that child over the past few months. His origins were unclear. But his resemblance to Fu Yanxiu and Juhuan in his eyes and brows made me wary. Me maternal grandfather's Fang family academy had the great scholar Chen Sheng presiding over it. The nobles in the capital flocked to it, and seats were extremely hard to come by. He was overjoyed. "You finally understood my good intentions for you and are willing to accept Mingyai." Only now did I finally ask Fu Yanxiu back. "Does the Marquis know that last month the Grand Secretary himself came to our door with generous gifts, just to secure a seat for his prodigy grandson? Master Chen wouldn't even let them through the gate," he said impatiently. "If you speak up, the Fang family will surely give face to your general's manner." Only then did I say indifferently, "If the elders of the Fang family knew that I still have to use my dowry to subsidize the Fu family, what would they think?" One sentence left them speechless on the spot. I let out a scornful laugh. My mother-in-law was exasperated and still wanted to point at me and scold. "You insolent slut who has no respect for elders." "Mother-in-law," I interrupted her indifferently, "husband probably doesn't know yet, right? You took all the reward money he earned fighting on the battlefield, and even his tuition fees from when he was studying, and lent them all out as usury." "What?" Fu Yanxiu whipped his head around, glaring at mother-in-law furiously. "You actually dared to lend usury in the capital. Don't you know that officials' family members lending usury can be impeached? Are you trying to destroy me?" Amidst the deathly silence in the room, the corner of my lips curled up slightly. "The day before the birthday banquet, madam, the old madam collected back most of the usury loans from the south side of the city this morning. I was sitting in the courtyard sunbathing when Hongshu hurried over, lowering her voice secretly. I heard that the Liu peddler's family suddenly ran out of money to turn over and was surrounded by merchants who couldn't get their goods." My fingertip paused, and I let out a cold laugh. Mother-in-law was finally scared. With the birthday banquet approaching, invitation cards from various residences came flying in like snowflakes. They had no other options now, and could only take this step. I asked Hongshu, "How are things on Juhuan's side?" Hongshu pouted. "She is busy taking inventory of the storeroom. This morning I even heard her scold the cook, saying that the birthday banquet shouldn't use jade green rice as it costs too much money." I gently touched the secret letter from Zheng Sanyang hidden in my sleeve. This birthday banquet was destined to be anything but peaceful. The next day, the main gate of the Marquise's residence was wide open. Juhuan, dressed in bright red with a head full of pearls and jade ornaments, jingling loudly, stood under the corridor greeting guests, looking just like a pompous golden pheasant showing off. "Madam of the Vice Minister, please come inside." She greeted guests while supporting her 5-month pregnant belly. I stood behind her watching coldly, only to see Zhang Sanyang ride her horse straight up to the steps. With a crack of her whip, she sent the teacup Zhu Huan was offering flying. She leaped off her horse, didn't even spare Zhu Huan a glance, and rushed over to grab my hand. "Dear sister, these lowly scoundrels haven't been mistreating you, have they?" Zhu Huan's smile froze on her face. Behind her, the maids immediately started whispering. Girls from military families are just so wild. They seemed to have forgotten that their own mistress was also a concubine-born daughter from a military family. Zhu Huan's expression turned even uglier upon hearing this. I chuckled softly, ignored her completely, and walked arm in arm with Zhang Sanyang toward Tinyu Pavilion. Sanyang swung the whip in her hand as she walked, voicing her indignation for me. "She is already climbing all over you, and you just put up with it." I squeezed her hand back. "My husband told everyone outside that I am grieving over losing my child, so that is why concubine Zhu is hosting the banquet in my place." I pulled her along, quickening my pace. "Forget about her. We have important matters to attend to." After reaching the Tinyu Pavilion, I had just closed the door when Zhang Sanyang immediately dropped her playful smile. Yan Gege was rescued by a hunter at the bottom of the cliff. His right leg is crippled. His arm was also injured. She pulled out half a black iron token from her bosom. This was found in the pile of battlefield remains. Take a look at the engraving on the back. The token was ice cold in my hand. The character Fu on the back was stained with dark red blood. A bloody sweetness surged up my throat. That bloody battle from 3 years ago suddenly tore through my vision. Grandfather was hit by 7 arrows yet still defended Yingzui Cliff to the death. Cousin fell into the abyss while protecting the supply route. While Fu Yanxiu and my father happened to arrive 3 days late with reinforcements. The hunter said, when Yan Gege fell, he got caught on a tree branch and witnessed with his own eyes Fu family's private soldiers on the cliff finishing off the wounded. Your Fang family army was stabbed in the back by your own people. Zhang Sanyang is the younger sister of young General Zheng from Mobei. 3 years ago, young General Zheng was leading a patrol outside and missed that earth-shaking battle. Grandfather died on the battlefield. Cousin fell off the cliff. After my father and Fu Yanxiu returned to the capital, their story was that they escaped with the reinforcements, even beat the northern Zhao army into retreat, and finally ceded a city before the war ended. After that, father was granted the title of Great General by the Emperor. Fu Yanxiu, because of this military merit, was rewarded by the Emperor with the inheritance of nobility. It was also from that day on that he was no longer mocked by the capital's nobility as a useless heir with nothing but an empty title. I gripped the token in my hand tightly and sneered coldly. Very good. In the front hall, gilded candelabras illuminated the entire room in splendor. The Princess Royal sat in the main seat, her nail guards lightly tapping against the teacup. Though she wore a proper smile, a hint of frost gathered in her eyes. At such a gathering of nobles, to have a concubine seated beside the head of the house, the Zhongyang Marquis Manor, truly grows ever more ignorant of propriety. Me father Zhu Daoming was completely oblivious, still putting on airs as a second-rank military official while clinking cups with the Vice Minister of War. Back then in the northern desert, the snow was waist-deep, and I single-handedly took the enemy general's head. The stench of alcohol sprayed on the other's face, and the vice minister barely managed a smile while leaning back. Concubine Lu, wearing a gold-woven vest that exceeded her station, was pinching her voice while hovering around several noble ladies. Our master loves Snow Peak with Jade the most, says it tastes even better than the blood tea from the northern desert. The Duchess of Yingguo suddenly stood up to excuse herself. This humble one is being rude. I shall go freshen up. The other 2 ladies also immediately left their seats, accidentally knocking over the teacup concubine Lu had offered, the scalding tea splashing on her shoes, yet no one stopped to spare her a glance. Amidst the swaying pearls and jade ornaments in the hall, the noble ladies exchanged knowing glances. The Madam of Yongchang Earl covered her face with a round fan and chuckled softly. At the legitimate daughter's mother-in-law's birthday banquet, they let a concubine and illegitimate daughter take the lead. General Zhu's family traditions. TSK. This drew a wave of whispers. I heard the real Marchioness is eating vegetarian in the back courtyard. The illegitimate sister stepped on the legitimate one to rise up. The concubine wears bright red to greet guests. This family is such a mess. Ju Huan was completely oblivious, still flitting around the venue with her 5-month belly. She had just served tea to the usually gentle Madame of Angwo Duke, but the other party merely touched it to her lips before frowning. This tea, could it have gotten damp? Hearing her say this, all the noble ladies in the hall, who had just taken a sip of the newly served Snow Peak Emerald as etiquette required, froze in unison. The tea that concubine Lu had just praised to the heavens. The tea soup indeed looked clear and bright, but upon tasting it was like aged rainwater mixed with rust, so astringent it numbed the root of the tongue and carried a moldy smell. This tea is quite unique. The Madame of Angwo Duke forced a smile and set down her teacup, Ju Huan's hand pouring tea for her frozen place, her eyelashes trembling slightly, quite flustered. In the silence of the room, concubine Lu hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over. The madams may not know, this is precisely the tea that soldiers in the northern desert often drink. The Zhongyang Marquis family has been loyal for generations, and the Marquis himself said, drinking this tea is like witnessing the spirit of the frontier. Fu Yanxiu nodded in agreement repeatedly. Mother-in-law also hurriedly signaled to Ju Huan, "Yes, yes, hurry up and refill for the Grand Princess." Just like that, they barely managed to turn this page. After that, dish after dish of delicacies was served like flowing water. The braised sea cucumber with scallions was glossy and plump. The hibiscus chicken slices were tender as congealed fat. The lotus leaf steamed pork wafted with a light fragrance, and laughter and music gradually filled the banquet again. I knew this was all Fu Yanxiu's doing. After all, last night when he discovered the banquet menu was all cheap goods. His roar could be heard even from Tinju Pavilion. With a budget of 30 taels per table, you dare use moldy dried goods. Do you think my Zhongyang Marquis manor is a beggar's den? In the end, he had no choice but to spend a fortune hiring chefs from Shunfeng House, and also last-minute switched to the Shusi Troupe's performance. It is just a pity some things he couldn't replace. When Ju Huan recommended dishes once again, the Duchess of Angwo nodded slightly, but her silver chopsticks only lightly touched the edge of the plate. The heat control is just right. The lady at the neighboring seat whispered behind her round fan, "Fresh it is, but this abalone sauce is too cleverly made, lacking the richness of slow home-style simmering." Chunfeng House's quick flames and roaring stoves ultimately lacked the gentle simmering skills of noble houses, and the distinguished guests present still detected the subtle differences. On the stage, the Shusi troupe was singing "Megu Offers Longevity," the drums and music barely covering the whispers at the banquet, as expected of a nouveau riche. Even the banquet has to be outsourced. I heard the opera troupe on stage was switched at the last minute. Though not perfect, there were no notable faults either. On the other side, Fu Yanxiu had just caught his breath and was preparing to raise his cup for a toast. But suddenly there was a loud clang. The son of the Vice Minister of War collapsed straight to the ground, knocking over an entire table of cups and dishes. Immediately after, cries of alarm erupted throughout the hall as a young lady clutched her stomach and curled into a ball. Even the Grand Princess's face turned deathly pale as she gripped the edge of the table. "Imperial physician, summon the imperial physicians at once." Agonized screams erupted one after another from the guests throughout the hall, alarming enough that every imperial physician on duty at the Imperial Medical Bureau arrived, over 20 of them in total. The problem should be with the rice. After carefully examining the food present, the imperial physicians reached the same conclusion: all 38 tables at the banquet had been served with old, moldy rice. The aflatoxin has already entered the organs. They must immediately take detoxification decoction and rest for over a month. Mother-in-law had been sitting beside the Grand Princess, but now she was in a panicked state of disarray, her hair disheveled as she supported the Grand Princess. "Your Highness, please see clearly. Could the imperial physicians have made a mistake? This old woman also ate the food. How could I be unharmed? Only then did everyone realize that none of the Zhongyang Marquis Manor's people showed any signs of poisoning. Before her words even finished, furious curses surged through the hall like a tide. What kind of intentions does your Marquis Manor have? You actually served moldy rice to the imperial relatives. Impossible! Zhu Huan collapsed to the ground. The household eats this rice every day. It can't possibly be poisoned. Her sharp fingernails pointed at the cook who had been dragged out by the Princess Manor's guards. It must be her. Yes, it must be this lowly servant who poisoned it. The cook fell to her knees with a thud. I am wronged, my lord. Please see clearly. The concubine, to save money, forced us to mix 30% moldy rice into the fresh rice every day. This time for the birthday banquet was even worse. A whole 70% was mixed in. The arrested kitchen procurement steward also kowtowed frantically. This mixed rice. Everyone in the household eats it daily. They've long become desensitized. But the honored guests are of noble status. What they eat and use daily must all be of finest quality. How could they withstand such poison? In the deathly silence of the hall, the Grand Princess took the detoxification decoction presented by the imperial physician and slowly rose with the support of her attendants. Her face was pale as she swept her gaze over the Fu family members collapsed on the ground. What a fine, loyal, and brave Marquis Manor, truly rotten to the very core. The Vice Minister of War was supported by his servants, his fingers trembling. Loyal and brave Marquis, at tomorrow's morning court, this old official will definitely impeach you. Disregarding human life. Poisoning imperial relatives. Such conduct. How is it any different from beasts? They must be severely punished, thoroughly investigated. Voices of agreement and curses surged like a tide. But Fu Yanxiu had no time to attend to this at the moment, because a group of Yamen runners filed in and surrounded everyone present. Fu Enfai Wang. The Jingzhao Yin ignored the mess all over the ground, his gaze locked onto the mother-in-law who was trying to shrink into the crowd with a ghastly pale face. You lent money at usurious rates to exploit the common people, and when collecting debts, you let your men run wild. Liu the peddler couldn't bear the humiliation and hanged himself. Li the widow threw herself into the river to prove her innocence and preserve her chastity. 2 lives lost in a single day. Now you are to be arrested and brought to justice, to be tried immediately. Mother-in-law let out an huff and collapsed limply to the ground. I am wronged. They couldn't think it through themselves. This old woman just wanted to get her own money back. You want your money back? The prefect of Jingzhou sneered, waving his hand for the constables to arrest him. Liu's shop was completely destroyed by your men, and even the silver lock from a baby's cradle was stolen to pay off debts. Widow Li's loom was smashed and used as firewood. How are she and her children supposed to survive? Now the victims' bodies are lying at the entrance of the Jingzhou prefectural office. Their blood-written letters are filled with anguish, and the entire city is in an uproar. If I don't arrest you immediately, I fear this marquise's mansion will be trampled flat by the angry mob. Fu Yanxiu's vision went black, and he nearly collapsed. Marquise Fu, the Jingzhao Yin spoke as if just noticing him, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Your household truly knows how to hold celebrations and funerals all at once, quite the lively affair. You'd better think about how to save yourself first. The impeachment memorials from the censorate, accusing you of failing to manage your household and condoning your mother's violence, must have already piled high on His Majesty's desk. Before he finished speaking, the household steward came tumbling in, crying out tearfully, My lord, disaster has struck. The front gate is completely surrounded by furious commoners, rotten vegetables, and stinking eggs have been thrown until the plaque can't even be seen anymore. And there are several groups of censors from the censorate waiting right at the gate, saying they want to interrogate you on the spot. Fu Yanxiu could no longer spare attention for his old mother rolling on the ground, or for Zhu Huan, whose face had gone deathly pale and who wouldn't stop screaming. Amidst the chaos, cursing, and wailing, he practically staggered out through the side gate in a desperate escape. In the days that followed, he tried to run around pulling strings to salvage the situation, yet for several days straight, Every door was closed to him. Former colleagues who once called him brother either refused to see him or gave him empty pleasantries. Meanwhile, the impeachment memorials against him fell like a blizzard in the depths of winter, showing no sign of letting up, pouring ever more fiercely into the palace. We impeach Marquis Zhongyang Fu Yanxiu for failing to discipline his household, condoning his mother's violence, driving innocent commoners to death, and betraying imperial grace. Sen failed to manage his inner chambers properly, allowing his concubine to poison clan relatives and meritorious nobles with moldy rice. His heart deserves death. In the end, things had come to this dead end. Fu Yanxiu finally set aside his pitiful pride and came begging at my door, all because I had received an invitation from the Grand Princess 2 days ago. The Flower Festival was a grand banquet personally hosted by the Grand Princess each year, inviting all the nobles and officials in the capital. Its purpose was self-evident. It was about enjoying spring, but even more so, a silent declaration of power and political wins. This invitation was an opportunity for me, but for some people, it was their last lifeline. After just a few days apart, his eye sockets were sunken and his stubble was thick and dark. Yonner, the palace banquet, the Grand Princess's invitation. Could you take me along? Right now, though I am on leave at home, many old friends and acquaintances will attend the banquet. I just need to get in, work the room a bit, and the situation will surely still have room for maneuvering. Those people at the censorate. His words stuck in his throat, because Hongshu walked over carrying a watering bucket and directly splashed it all at his feet with a whoosh. My voice was calm and flat. The Marquis jests right now. The memorials impeaching you could probably cover the entire Golden Hall. At such a critical moment, how could I dare bring you to disturb the Grand Princess's refined mood? What is more, I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. Have you forgotten how Honger died? How do you think I should feel, taking your arm and stepping into that Chuanglin garden? Fu Yanxiu's face instantly turned pale as paper, yet he couldn't utter a single word, only despair filling his eyes along with a trace of shame and anger at being exposed. He staggered back a step, bumping into the crabapple tree trunk, shaking down a few withered leaves that fell desolately onto his shoulders. I had already turned away, no longer looking at him, and said to Hongshu, "See the guest out. From now on, don't let just anyone through the gates." He didn't dare come again after that, so he egged on Zhu Huan to send a heartfelt family banquet invitation in my father's name, a vermilion invitation card trimmed with tacky gold edges. Opening it revealed Zhu Huan's affected handwriting, every line dripping with condescending implications of reunion. I held the invitation, feeling only irony. Just a Hongmen banquet, nothing more, however. I had already planned to visit the Zhu residence once more anyway. On the day of the banquet, I didn't keep a low profile. 8 sturdy servants brought by the Fang family cleared the way, with 2 maids on each side. Though the entourage was simple, the presence was commanding. The banquet was set in the waterside pavilion, with exquisite dishes. Zhu Huan kept serving food to Fu Yanxiu, but her eyes frequently glanced toward me. Fu Yanxiu was clearly distracted, spilling his wine several times. After a few rounds of drinks, the show finally began. Zhu Huan suddenly held her forehead, whining coquettishly about how stuffy it was, and asked Fu Yanxiu to accompany her to the garden for some fresh air. Fu Yanxiu acted as if granted amnesty, hurriedly getting up to support her. The two played off each other perfectly, and soon left arm in arm, leaving the whole table of awkwardness and silence to me and father. I set down my silver chopsticks and dabbed the corner of my mouth. What was meant to come had finally arrived. Yarner, the Marquis Manor is now in troubled times. No matter how many wrongs Yanxiu has done, he is still your husband. You should understand the principle that glory and ruin are shared together. The Fang family's former subordinates still have influence in and out of the court. This is exactly when you need to step forward and smooth things over. Father, I looked up, my gaze cold and clear as I stared at him. When he favored his concubine and mistreated his wife, When he indulged Zhu Huan in killing my hunger, did he ever think of me as his wife? Now that the tall building is about to collapse, he suddenly remembers this tattered banner wanting me to use the goodwill my grandfather left behind to patch the holes in his broken ship. What kind of reasoning is this? He spun around abruptly, his gaze carrying the fury of being defied. Foolish. How can petty grudges of the inner chambers be compared with the rise and fall of the family? If the Marquis manor falls, you'll be nothing but a cast-off woman. How will you hold your ground in the future? And what good will it do the Fang family? I slowly stood up, walking toward him step by step, my voice not loud, yet each word struck like a nail. Father, you keep saying husband and wife are one body, sharing glory and loss together. Do you even believe that yourself? But I wonder, back then on Eagle Beak Cliff in the northern desert, when you and my dear husband faced my gravely wounded grandfather and my brother Yan, whose fate was unknown, what kind of glory and what kind of together were you thinking of then? Father's pupils suddenly contracted, his face twitching slightly. Yonner, father truly did his best back then. Are you still blaming me for that? Before his words even finished, I suddenly swept my arm out and precisely gripped the long spear from the weapon rack behind me. I flicked my wrist, the spear tip slicing through the stifling air with a hum, pointing straight ahead. Father's pupils suddenly contracted, his face full of shock and disbelief. You, please enlighten me, father. I cut him off sharply, saying nothing more. I stepped forward, power surging from my waist, the long spear thrusting swiftly at his face. He was after all a battle-hardened veteran, and in his haste immediately grabbed another long spear to block. Clang! A piercing clash of metal rang out, making the bowls and plates on the table hum and rattle. My assault didn't stop. The spear moved with my body cleaving, sweeping, jabbing, flicking, each move vicious and cunning. Nothing like what a lady of the inner chambers should know. At first, he could barely manage to parry, but the more they fought, the more alarmed he became, fine beads of cold sweat starting to seep from his temples. He had clearly never imagined that his seemingly docile daughter could possess such fierce skills. Clang. Another heavy clash. Mi's spear shaft pressed precisely on the weak point of his blade, and I exerted force suddenly. Pain shot through the web of his hand, nearly making him lose his grip. He staggered back 2 steps before steadying himself, his breathing already erratic. He looked at me as if seeing a strange monster, gasping, unable to speak coherently. You, when did you learn such? I withdrew my spear and stood tall. Grandfather said the children of the Fang family never flee from battle. The 4 words flee from battle seared into his heart like a red-hot branding iron. Killing intent flickered in father's eyes like a venomous snake flicking its tongue, vanishing in an instant. His fingers tightened around the spear shaft, veins bulging, as if completely oblivious to that fleeting murderous intent. I walked straight up, extended my arm, and without allowing any objection, snatched the long spear that belonged to him from his slightly loosened grip. Holding both long spears in my hands, I turned and walked toward the door, my back straight. Upon reaching the doorway, I paused but did not turn around, leaving only a cold sentence behind. What you asked for, I have agreed to. The food of this Jew manor is filthy. I won't be having any, afraid I might choke on it. That day, the Chuanglin garden was filled with fragrant breezes and graceful silhouettes, the sounds of strings and woodwinds never ceasing. The grand princess sat regally in the phoenix seat, magnificent and dignified. I brought Yanxiu to the banquet. Among the nobles, he looked particularly down and out. He tried to strike up conversations, but only received perfunctory responses and avoidance. Halfway through the feast, the music suddenly stopped. Everyone looked over in shock, only to see my father Zhu Daoming leading concubine Lu and Zhu Huan brazenly stepping in. They instantly attracted all the contemptuous and astonished gazes. How can a concubine enter the main hall? An old censor immediately flicked his sleeves and rebuked in a low voice. But Zhu Huan held her head high, hand protecting her belly. I am carrying the legitimate grandson of the Marquis's household. Who dares stop me? This belly is my trump card. The scene became awkward and chaotic. Fu Yanxiu's face turned deathly pale, wishing he could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Just then, the Princess Royal slowly rose and announced, "On this auspicious flower festival, this princess has the honor of bringing back a hero of our great Yang, someone we thought had long sacrificed for the nation." Everyone's gaze instantly focused on the entrance. The sound of a wheelchair rolling was clearly heard. A man dressed in black, with a thin blanket over his knees, steadily holding a swaddled infant in his arms, was slowly pushed in by an attendant. His face was gaunt, crisscrossed with scars, but his eyes alone were piercingly bright. Yan, young General Fang. Didn't he already, 3 years ago? The whole hall erupted like boiling water. The jade cup in my father's hand fell with a clatter. Fu Yanxiu even shot to his feet, knocking over the table, sending fruit plates rolling all over the floor. Cousin Fang, Yan's gaze slowly swept over them, his voice not loud, yet like thunder splitting apart all the false peace. "Uncle brother-in-law, surprised to see me still alive? After all, back then at Eagle's Beak Cliff, it was you two who pushed me off with your own hands." Absolute dead silence enveloped Quanglin Garden. All eyes were nailed onto the ashen-faced Zhu Daoming and Fu Yanxiu. The princess's voice broke this suffocating silence. "General Zhu, Marquis Zhongyang, regarding this accusation, do the two of you have anything to say?" Before either of them could speak, Zhu Huan jumped out first. "Don't you dare make such baseless accusations." Cousin Yan couldn't even be bothered to look at her. "A daughter of a concubine. What right do you have to speak so shamelessly here?" Zhu Huan was so stung by Fang Yan's words, "daughter of a concubine," that she jumped in rage, losing all reason, shrieking, "Don't you dare make baseless accusations. What concubine back then? It was clearly my mother who married father first. It was your Fang family bullying others with your power. I should have been the legitimate eldest miss of the Zhu family." Her outburst was like thunder splitting open the filthy scandal the Zhu family had carefully concealed for years. The whole venue erupted in uproar, all eyes instantly focused on her and Zhu Daoming, whose expression had drastically changed. "Huaner! Shut up!" Zhu Daoming shouted harshly to stop her, but it was already too late. Brother Yan sat in his wheelchair, let out a cold laugh, his voice not loud yet clearly reaching everyone's ears. "Married first? Are you referring to how Zhu Daoming, that guerrilla minor general under my maternal grandfather's command, concealed that he already had a wife, Lady Lu, in the countryside, and deceived my aunt, the legitimate daughter of the Fang family, into marriage? Are you referring to how he took my aunt's generous dowry, yet secretly sent it to the northern border year after year to support his so-called first wife and illegitimate daughter? Are you referring to how, when my aunt from the Fang family was wasting away from illness, he couldn't wait to elevate his mistress to the position of legitimate wife? If I hadn't shown up at your father's door with a gun to dissuade him, telling him, 'If you do this today, I'll make sure all of the capital knows your true face,' I am afraid today you wouldn't be a stepdaughter, but a legitimate daughter who stole the nest from the rightful owners. You are lying. You are lying." Zhu Huan trembled all over, screaming futilely. The venue had already exploded into chaos. The nobles exchanged shocked and disdainful glances, whispers surging up like a tide. Oh my God, so that is how it was. Abandoning his wife to remarry. Deceiving the Fang family's legitimate daughter into marriage? Using the legitimate wife's dowry to support a mistress and illegitimate daughter? Truly the height of shamelessness. No wonder old General Fang suddenly distanced himself from him back then. Zhu Daoming's face turned ashen as he tried to salvage the situation. "Ino, Yan, your wounds haven't healed. Your mind is confused. Don't spout nonsense here and be used by villains." He turned to the crowd, forcing composure as he cupped his hands. "My daughter speaks nonsense out of ignorance. The young general's injuries must be too severe and affecting his mind. Everything he says is baseless speculation. Everyone please don't take it seriously. Today is the flower festival. Let's not let such absurd talk spoil everyone's refined mood." Just at that moment, jade pendants chimed softly as the emperor and empress's procession arrived. The emperor raised an eyebrow, asking with great interest, "Oh, such excitement. What are you all debating about?" Father and Yanxiu forced composure, bowing deeply toward the throne, their voices resounding as they tried to overwhelm with momentum. "Your Majesty, please discern the truth. In the battle at the northern desert 3 years ago, every word in the military reports was accurate. When reinforcements reached Eagle Beak Cliff, old General Fang and the young general had already fallen in battle. It was we who fought through blood and turned the tide, forcing northern Zhao to cede cities and sue for peace. The young general's survival is joyous news, but his severe injuries must have damaged his mind, or he has been bewitched by villains, causing him to spout nonsense and slander loyal subjects. The Princess Royal personally pushed cousin's wheelchair before the throne. Though his complexion was pale, his gaze was sharp, word by word, sentence by sentence. He laid bare the bloody truth of Eaglebeak Cliff from that year. How they fell into an ambush due to faulty intelligence. How grandfather fought until his last breath. How the Northern Desert Army launched a desperate counterattack that severely wounded the enemy. And when the so-called reinforcements finally arrived, not only did they refuse to rescue them, but to cover up their crimes of delaying military orders and falsely claiming military merit, how they forced the remaining Fang family troops to the edge of the cliff, then unleashed a storm of arrows. He raised his right arm that clearly couldn't exert any strength. This arm of mine was shot through by Yanxiu, my good brother-in-law, and I fell off the cliff. If not for the herb gatherer at the bottom of the cliff who saved me, my bones would have long turned to dust. Preposterous, utter nonsense. Zhu Daoming interrupted with a hoarse shriek. Your Majesty, these are all just his one-sided claims. The situation was chaotic at the time. Where would there be any witnesses or evidence? How can we allow him to slander a meritorious minister of the nation with nothing but empty words? Yanxiu hurriedly chimed in. Exactly, Your Majesty. He is clearly trying to stand up for Zhu Yan and take revenge on this humble minister. His intentions are deplorable. I almost laughed out loud, but then I saw my concubine-born stepmother, Concubine Lu, suddenly throw herself to the ground, crying out, Your Majesty, this humble wife can testify. I was there at the time. Every word the Grand General and the Marquis said is true. Young General Fang is making false accusations. I looked at her coldly, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You, a woman of the inner chambers, how could you possibly testify about military matters at the front lines? As if you are even worthy. Just when they thought there was no evidence left and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. I took a deep breath, pulled out a small package wrapped tightly in oilcloth from my chest, and held it high. Did you really think I had no evidence? My voice was calm. Yet every word struck like a hammer. These past few days, I found this in the hidden compartment of Yanxiu's study. And using the family banquet as an opportunity, I had a maidservant sneak into my father's study to find another copy. My gaze swept over the two ashen-faced individuals. It seems you two never fully trusted each other either, both needing to keep leverage over the other to feel safe working together. The Emperor picked up one letter. The Empress picked up the other. After a brief glance, both their expressions darkened. On them were not only conspiracies to delay military intelligence and frame comrades, but even cold-blooded plans to divide military merits and eliminate loose ends. Seeing the ironclad evidence against him, Yanxiu, in desperation, acted like a common shrew, pointing at his father-in-law first and cursing, Zhu Daoming, you shameless old thief, if you hadn't been greedy for glory and rushed ahead recklessly back then, how would? Zhu Daoming's eyes nearly burst with rage as he shot back. Shut up. You ungrateful wolf, without my promotion. Where would you be today? That arrow was clearly shot by you. In the Golden Hall, two former meritorious officials tore at each other like rabid dogs. The entire court fell silent, only their ugly roars echoing. They cursed until their voices were hoarse, and they were gasping for breath. Only then did I slowly step forward. Your Majesty, Your Highness. I wonder if you have noticed that these letters, including the secret letter brought back by Brother Yian, all carry a faint trace of a peculiar fragrance. The emperor furrowed his brow, handing the letter to a servant beside him to pass to the imperial physician for identification. The empress also nodded slightly. This fragrance is called Dream Datura. It doesn't exist in our dynasty. It is a secret concoction of the northern Zhao royal family. The scent is long-lasting and doesn't fade for years. My gaze turned to concubine Lu, who was already trembling like a leaf. Coincidentally, this fragrance is exactly the same as the incense that my dear concubine mother and sister Zhuan loved to burn daily. "You are lying!" Zhuan shrieked, but I no longer looked at her, only staring at Lu Yunjiao. Do you know why they received the wrong intelligence back then? It was all you using your intimate access to secretly swap the real military reports, delaying the timing by 3 days. Seeing that everything was completely exposed, Lu Yunjiao no longer resembled the gentle and tender concubine she usually appeared to be by father's side. The fear on her face gradually transformed into a bizarre madness. She suddenly raised her head and let out a sharp, bone-chilling laugh. Everyone says I was infatuated. How could I have been infatuated for years with Zhu Daoming, that heartless, faithless scoundrel? What an utter joke. She looked around at everyone, her eyes filled with twisted satisfaction. That is right. I was the one who altered those intelligence reports. I was always a spy planted here by Bei Zhao, watching you all slaughter each other. How satisfying. Her face showed a ferocious smugness. What a pity. What a pity. Just a little more. 3 years now. Your northern defense line has long been hollowed out. Once my great army returns. Heh. Upon the throne, the emperor, who had been watching coldly all along, suddenly let out a faint, contemptuous laugh, cutting off her deranged fantasy. Fool. The emperor's voice wasn't loud yet. It carried thunderous pressure. You are still dreaming such pipe dreams. This morning's urgent 800 LE military report arrived. Your Beijiao's main forces were completely annihilated 3 days ago. At Blackwater Valley, your nation's third prince is currently in shackles on his way to the capital. The crazed laughter on Lu Yunjiao's face instantly froze, twisting into utter horror and disbelief. Her mouth hung open, but she couldn't make a single sound anymore. Her whole body collapsed like her bones had been pulled out. Inside the golden hall, dead silence. Only the bloody stench of truth and the coldness of a failed conspiracy spread through the air. Lu Yunjiao's wailing was drowned out by the rough, dragging sounds of the guards. Grand General Zhu Daoming for deceiving the sovereign, colluding with the enemy, and committing treason crimes beyond forgiveness. Stripped of all titles, exiled immediately to Ninguta, never to be recalled. Marquise of Loyalty and Valor Fu Yanxiu for conspiring to murder comrades in arms and falsely claiming military merit, crimes tantamount to treason. His title is hereby stripped. He is demoted to commoner status, and all family assets are to be confiscated. The decree fell like a final verdict, striking Fu Yanxiu so hard his body swayed violently, his face ashen as death. Zhu Huan threw herself onto him, crying loudly. Whether for his downfall or her own future, no one could tell. Suddenly, Fu Yanxiu grabbed Zhu Huan tightly. In his dead eyes, a final glint of madness burst forth. He struggled to crawl forward 2 steps, and toward the throne he screamed hoarsely, "Your Majesty, sire, my few ancestors rendered great service to the nation and were enshrined in the imperial ancestral temple. The late emperor personally promised that as long as the few bloodline continues and there are heirs, the title shall never be stripped. Does that promise still hold?" The emperor's gaze darkened slightly after a moment. He slowly nodded. The late emperor did grant such favor. However, you have no son. I do. Fu Yanxiu clutched at this last straw, his voice cracking with agitation. Zhu Huan. She carries my flesh and blood. This is my son. The Fu bloodline is not broken. A scoff came from above, from some official. Fu Yanxiu, how do you know it is definitely a boy in her belly? What if it is a daughter? I still have one. Fu Yanxiu, cornered to the brink, lost all reason and blurted out, Ming Yai, I still have Ming Yai. Ming Yai is my biological son. He is the son Huaner, and I had 8 years ago when we were stationed at the border. He carries my Fu family's bloodline. He has the right to inherit the title. 8 years ago, stationed at the border. I laughed. So that is how it is. No wonder Marquis Fu showed such deep affection for my half-sister. Turns out the mother and daughter schemes are truly cut from the same cloth, one and the same. Fu Yanxiu had no room left for shame at this moment. His eyes held nothing but that illusory title as he kowtowed repeatedly toward the throne, his forehead instantly turning purple and bruised. I beg your majesty for mercy. Mingyi is my biological son. The bloodline is certain. I beg your majesty to allow him to inherit the title, to continue my Fu family's lineage. His desperate confession tore away the last shred of dignity completely. Just then, a servant suddenly came to report from outside the hall. He was led in by the guards, drenched from head to toe, stumbling and crawling until he collapsed before Fu Yanxiu, his voice choked with tears. Master, master, something terrible happened. Young Master Mingyi at the academy got into a dispute with someone, slipped and fell into the koi pond. When they pulled him out, he was already gone. What? Fu Yanxiu felt as if struck by lightning, his entire body stiffening abruptly. That hint of frenzied light, ignited by the word sun, was instantly extinguished, his complexion turning completely ashen, his lips trembling yet unable to produce a single sound. He stiffly turned his head, his gaze fixed rigidly on Zhu Huan's slightly bulging abdomen. Like a dying beast seeing its last drop of blood, just then, the old imperial physician who had been carefully examining the secret letters finally stepped forward. Your Majesty, this old servant has just thoroughly examined these letters and the lingering fragrance on Lord Fu and Lord Zhu. This incense is indeed called Dream Datura, and it is no ordinary exotic spice. When used regularly by women, it can indeed enhance arousal and induce infatuation, but if a man is exposed to it for extended periods in excessive amounts, its nature is yin cold, and it will severely damage the vital essence, leading to infertility. A glint of understanding and amusement flashed in the emperor's eyes as he said indifferently, "Oh, if that is the case, then do give Lord Fu a thorough pulse examination and see what is really going on." Fu Yanxiu's mind was in utter turmoil at this moment, and he had even forgotten to resist. The imperial physician's fingertips rested on his wrist, and after a moment he withdrew his hand with a grave expression, slowly shaking his head toward the throne. Your Majesty, Lord Fu's pulse is sunken. Rough, slow, and weak, the signs of depleted kidney essence are not recent. In this old servant's assessment, with Lord Fu's condition, this infertility has persisted for at least half a year. Half a year? My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for everyone to hear clearly. Counting the days, wasn't it half a year ago that concubine Lu, under the pretext of taking care of her daughter, was brought to the capital and moved into the Jew residence? TFFT, I finally couldn't hold back and burst out laughing. This laughter sounded particularly jarring in the Golden Hall. Fu Yanxiu was like a powder keg that had been ignited. All his despair, anger, and shame exploded at that moment. His eyes were bloodshot as he suddenly let out a beast-like roar, raising his foot to viciously kick Zhu Huan's belly beside him. You are just like that venomous mother of yours. Both of you are poisonous snakes out to ruin me. Whose seed is in your belly? Caught off guard, Zhu Huan let out a miserable scream as she was kicked to the ground, a pool of glaring blood instantly spreading beneath her. She curled up in agony, futilely trying to grab Fu Yanxiu's hem. Husband, husband, don't listen to their provocations. This is our child. But Fu Yanxiu seemed to have been drained of all strength. Looking at that pool of blood, then at his own trembling hands, he staggered backward, his gaze hollow, repeatedly muttering to himself. It is over. It is all over. Everything is gone. The hall was in complete chaos. Just then, the infant who had been quietly resting in Brother Yan's arms, as if disturbed by the blood and madness, suddenly burst into wailing cries. Me heart tightened, and I immediately hurried forward, carefully taking the child wrapped in a silk swaddling cloth from my brother's arms, gently cradling him, and whispered, "There, there, don't be scared. Auntie's here." I skillfully patted and soothed him, and the child actually stopped crying gradually, staring at me with a pair of bright, dark eyes. Yanxiu suddenly raised his head, his clouded eyes fixed intently on the child in my arms. He seemed to have found some lifeline, struggling to get up and stumbling over, trying to snatch the child. "This appearance is clearly my Honger, isn't it? Honger isn't dead. Give him back to me. Give him back to me." I turned aside to avoid his filthy hands, holding the child protectively, coldly watching his crazed state. "Yanxiu, have you gone mad? My Honger died long ago from your Marquis household's neglect and coldness. Have you forgotten?" I lowered my head to look at the adorable, fair-skinned baby in my arms, my tone turning firm and proud. "This is an orphan that Brother Yen adopted at the border, a child of our Fang family. Personally decreed by His Majesty, the heir who will inherit the Fang family's noble title in the future." "You are lying! You are deceiving me!" Yanxiu simply wouldn't listen, stubbornly screaming. "Those brows, those features, they're clearly my Honger. You are all conspiring to deceive me." No matter how he protested, the emperor upon the throne had already spoken, his voice majestic, settling all under heaven. "By my imperial decree." The case in the northern frontier 3 years ago has now been investigated, and it has been determined that it was caused by Zhu Daoming and Yanxiu's deception of the emperor and their framing of loyal officials. General Fang and General Fang Yen shall be immediately exonerated and their reputations restored, granted posthumous titles, and their names enshrined in the imperial ancestral temple. The Fang family's loyalty is evident to heaven and earth. General Fang Yan was unmatched in loyalty and valor, remaining resolute despite his disabilities. He is specially granted the title Marquis of Pacifying the North, hereditary and irreplaceable. His adopted son shall be named Fang Chengji, recognized as the Fang family bloodline, and enjoy the honor of the Marquis Manor's heir. Once the imperial decree was issued, everything was settled. Yanxiu seemed to have his last bit of strength drained away, completely collapsing onto the ground. With hollow eyes, he stared at the child in my arms who represented the Fang family's future, and hope unable to make a single sound anymore. Glory belongs to the loyal souls. Justice, though delayed, has arrived. As for certain people, they can only fall into the bottomless abyss of their own making, consumed by endless regret and despair. The golden hall finally fell completely silent. I held the warm little body in my arms, feeling his steady breathing, and only then did my tightly strung heartstrings slightly relax. No one knew that every step I took to get here was like walking on thin ice. When I insisted on entering the palace back then, it wasn't entirely to escape the suffocating oppression in the manor. Also, because at that time I received a secret letter written in blood from a spy I had planted in Nanzhao, who had risked his life to deliver it. The vague yet fatal clues on it coiled around my sanity, like a venomous snake. The letter said that the one who delivered the finishing blow at the cliff bottom back then left blade marks matching the Central Plains Army's standard-issue weapons, and the source of the false military report actually vaguely pointed to my closest kin, my father and my husband. I was reluctant to believe it for a long time, even hoping that the secret letter was an enemy nation's scheme to sow discord, until the day I gave birth when I was dying from hemorrhaging, yet they were eager to abandon the mother and keep the child, and even allow Juhuan to use that poison tonic. Only then did I finally see clearly that the hearts of wolves cannot be warmed. So I presented the secret letter to your Majesty, threw myself into the game, and begged your Majesty to allow me to direct this play of luring the enemy into a trap. The danger during childbirth that day was real. Honger's serious illness was also real, but Honger did not die. His faint breathing that day was not entirely a pretense. The imperial physician truly did his best to save his life. I took the opportunity to give him the turtle breath, feigning death medicine personally bestowed by your Majesty. And that very night, the shadow guards arranged by your Majesty took him out of the Marquis Manor, escorting him all the way to the trusted confidants, sent by brother Yan. In the dead of night, when no one was around, the wet nurse swapped him out with a dead infant that had been prepared long ago. What lay in the ice-cold coffin was merely a carefully prepared substitute, and I had to stay in purgatory, playing the role of someone who lost his beloved son and became utterly disheartened. I even deliberately weakened the defenses of Tingyu Pavilion, tacitly allowing Zhu Huan to take charge of the household, making them think I had completely lost my power and letting their guard down. Sure enough, they got carried away, even letting newcomers who were their own people freely enter and exit important places like the study. Only then could Yanxiu have the chance to fish in troubled waters and find the original secret letters they guarded against each other, yet had no choice but to keep. At the same time, I never stopped being vigilant against concubine Lu and her daughter. The exotic incense they loved, their certain peculiar dietary preferences, all vaguely matched the habits of northern Zhao nobility described by our spies. But I only had suspicions, no solid proof. Until 3 days ago, when Brother Yan's former subordinates set an ambush at Blackwater Valley, crushing the northern Zhao remnants and capturing their third prince alive. Under harsh interrogation, he finally revealed that Lu Yunzhao was no orphan of a border general at all. She was a hidden piece carefully cultivated by the northern Zhao royal family and sent into the Central Plains years ago. Her purpose was to infiltrate the general's inner courts, spy on military intelligence when the opportunity arose, and create chaos. At this point, all the clues connected, and the whole truth came to light. I let out a long breath, as if a 1,000-pound burden had been lifted, and held the innocent Chengji in my arms even tighter. This dangerous game of chess, using myself as bait and my own flesh and blood as pieces, was finally won deep within the dark, damp imperial prison. I carried the food box and stood before that specially made prison cell. Mother-in-law was curled up on the moldy straw. Her hair, once combed immaculately into a bun, now looked like a tangled mess. Her expensive silk clothes had long become filthy, giving off a smell of sour rot mixed with blood. Hearing footsteps, her clouded eyes shifted slightly. When she saw it was me, her throat immediately let out a threatening rasp. "Mother-in-law," my voice was soft like a spring breeze, "we haven't seen each other for a few days, and you've gotten thinner. Your daughter-in-law came today because I was worried you might be cut off from news in prison, so I came specially to tell you a few fresh things, to relieve your boredom." Neither hurried nor slow, I told her everything that happened in the Golden Hall, how Yanxiu went mad and lost his noble title, how Zhu Huan was kicked and miscarried, then died on the spot, how Lu Yanzhao was exposed as a spy, how Mingyi accidentally drowned, one matter after another. Piece by piece, I told her in detail. Her breathing grew more and more rapid, her shriveled chest heaving violently. She suddenly widened her eyes and rasped hoarsely, "You vicious woman, you are lying. Whether I am lying or not, you know it in your heart." I smiled slightly. "Oh, and there is one more very important thing. His Majesty has issued an imperial decree to vindicate the Feng family, posthumously honoring my grandfather and uncle, and granting my brother the title of Marquis of Dingbei, a hereditary title. Our Feng family has a future again. Let me tell you a secret. The heir to the Feng family is Honger. He has now taken the Feng surname. PFFT." She suddenly spewed out a mouthful of dark red blood, splattering on the filthy wall, her whole body convulsing as she collapsed back into the straw pile, eyes unfocused, only desperate whimpers remaining. I signaled the jailer to open the cell door, personally carrying out a bowl of thick black medicinal soup. "Mother-in-law, please don't be upset. Anger harms the body." I squatted down almost at eye level with her, my tone extremely concerned. "You are old and frail, and suffered such a blow, your daughter-in-law truly aches for you. This is ginseng soup specially prepared for you, using the finest aged mountain ginseng, sure to keep you living 100 years, lucid every single day." That soup was laced with plenty of huanglian, bitter enough to pierce the heart. Keeping her alive was true. Keeping her lucid to endure every bit of pain was also true. With my own hands, spoon by spoon, I poured that extremely bitter liquid into her resisting mouth, making sure not a drop was left. From then on, this specially made ginseng soup would be delivered on time every day, the jailer reported back. Madame Fu Wang at first cursed and swore every day, then frantically clawed at the prison walls with her nails, all 10 fingers torn to bloody pulps, white bone visible until they broke off entirely. Later on, all that remained were the unconscious hoarse rattles from deep in her throat. But those eyes, due to the drug's effect, were forced to stay open, lucidly enduring the torment of an endless hell. As for Fu Yanxiu, how could I let him die so easily? I want him to live. Toe live lucidly. With nothing left, toe live and watch the Fu family bloodline be severed completely. To live and watch the title he treasured as his life be stripped away by imperial decree. To live and watch himself fall from the clouds, reduced to a beggar on the streets, bullied by all, dragging his crippled body, struggling to survive in the mud, until many years later, at the grand ceremony for the official investiture of the Marquis of Dingbei's heir, the ceremonial procession was magnificent. Guests gathered in droves. Mai Chengji, now grown into a handsome young man, walked toward his glory with high spirits. Suddenly, his steps halted, and he looked down at the filthy, foul-smelling beggar curled up in the shadows below the steps. The beggar seemed to sense something, too, raising his clouded eyes, staring blankly at him. Chengji's lips curled into a carefree, radiant smile, like the most dazzling sunlight. He lifted his foot, stepping over the beggar's outstretched, twig-like wrist without a shred of mercy. He walked briskly up the high steps, came before me, his voice clear and bright, carrying the sharpness and pride unique to youth. "Mother, look," he declared loudly, as if he had merely stepped over a bothersome pebble. "These steps, did your child walk them steadily?" I looked at him, looked at the figure curled up in pain and humiliation at the bottom of the steps, and slowly revealed a smile. "Steady," I said softly. "The path my son walks is naturally a smooth road to the heavens."